So, very good afternoon, everyone. And first of all of those who were, waiting for this session to begin on the bike platform and the YouTube channel of FICCI, our apologies. We were delayed by a few minutes, but as you know that when you do events on virtual platform, technical issues are inevitable. So once again, a very, very good afternoon. In fact, good morning. I'm sorry, a very good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of our speakers and those watching us live on YouTube and on the FICCI Bike platform to Sport IT 2022 Innovation, Effectuation, Inclusion. That's our tagline, being organized by Xavier EMU Business School in association with the Sports and Youth Services Department, Government of Odisha, Tourism Department, Government of Odisha, Startup Odisha, and FICCI. We are here for a very interesting discussion on sports industries in India, the management and mindset challenge, with an equally interesting panel. So let me start by welcoming them all to this discussion. We have with us founder, sportscourses.com, Mr. Arup Swans, Project Director, Odisha Naval Tata Hockey, High Performance Center of Excellence, Mr. Rajiv Seth, Digital Marketing and Communication Head, Decathlon Sports India, Mr. Gautam Ganesh, President JUM Consulting Paris, Mr. Julian Montel, CEO Marva Sports, Mr. Aritra Chatterjee. This session will be moderated by the chairman of Xavier EMU Business School, Mr. Ashley Fernandez. But before I hand it over to him to shed light on the topic and take the session forward, a little introduction about all our panelists here. We have with us Mr. Arup Swans, an expert in business strategy, sports marketing, and new media, a sports business consultant to events as large as FIFA World Cups to grassroots programs operating in sports like swimming, sailing, football, and other Olympic disciplines. He was part of the local organizing committee of the FIFA Under-17 World Cup India 2017 as head of marketing, managing a team of 45 full-time staff and 200 volunteers. The 17th edition of the tournament ended up raising the most sponsorship money to date and being the highest ever attended FIFA youth competition. He's also the first Indian to hold a master's degree in sports business from New York University. We have with us Mr. Rajiv Seth, an ex-first-class cricketer from Bengal and Odisha, the first batch trainee and product of MRF Pace Foundation, Madras, now Chennai, coached by none other than the legendary Dennis Lillee. He's played as a professional in English and Scottish Premier Division leagues. Having completed his ACC, ACB Level 3 coaching education program, he has also coached Malaysian national cricket team in 2010. He's currently an M-panel BCCI match referee. He had a short stint with Jamshedpur FC in their inaugural year, handling the administration and operations at Jamshedpur. He served in various capacities within Tata Steel before his current position, of course, as the project director of Odisha Naval Tata Hockey, HPC Odisha. We have with us Mr. Gautam Ganesh, the digital marketing and communication head of Decathlon India, an experienced professional with a demonstrated history of performance and adaptable with the skills of being a transformational leader, building cross-functional teams and making critical decisions during challenges to establish organizational goals. Focus areas have included brand management, business development, digital marketing, team management, strategy and consulting across industries like retail, marketing, e-commerce, and fashion. We have with us Mr. Julian Montel. He's been working in the sports sector since 2010. After 6 years in management of public policies, spent 7 years working for Kenyo, a leading French sport agency, developed the consulting activities in the agency along with, I hope I'm getting this pronunciation right, Etienne Toubois, now the CEO of Paris 2024 Organizing Committee. The scope of activities included bids for international events, Tokyo 2020, Paris 2024, planning and management of international events, and strategic consulting to develop sports policies. He left Kenyo in 2017, created his own structure before moving to Bangalore between 2017 and 2020. He's now back in France, and his main activities include consulting for sport events, Paris 2024, Rugby World Cup France 2023, and sports policies with a specific expertise on sport and development. However, he's still connected with India to develop projects on urban and nature sport. And we also have with us Mr. Aritra Chatterjee, COO Marva Sports. He has over a decade of experience in consulting, building new products and scaling existing ones, has worked both as an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur, consulting over 50 brands across 10 different industries in marketing and growth. As the COO of Marva Sports, he oversees multiple business units, and is responsible for identifying new opportunities to expand the company's footprint across the global sports ecosystem. So a very, very warm welcome to all of you. And as you all can see, I think we have an apt panel for this section, for this session, Sports Industries in India, when we are talking about the Management and Mindset Challenge. So I'll now request my chairman, Mr. Ashley Fernandez, to take this session forward, shed light on the topic, and shoot the questions to the panelists. I would just also like to inform everyone, those watching us live on YouTube or Bike, if you have any questions, you can redirect them on the Bike platform, and we would be taking up at the end of the session. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Diksha, for this introduction. Thank you all for being here on this panel. Indeed, as I said, there's a lot of experience, and I'm looking forward to a lot of insight from all of you. So just to dive into the topic, I was reading that sport is called the sunrise sector in the industry. FICCI's vision document estimated that there will be approximately 43.7 lakh human resources across the sports sector, and which is now pegged at close to 48 billion Indian rupees in terms of market size, and a growth of 12% year on year. So there's been booming sports league. Some of you are part of that, Indian Premier League, Pro Kabaddi, Indian Table Tennis League, ISL, Futsal, etc. There's been a boost in television rating and sports programs. There's been an increase in marketing and branding. There's been heightened athletes representation, increase in infrastructure spending. We were talking about the incredible boost that the government of Orissa has been giving to the sports sector. I think Marva is pretty much into that as well. 52 official national sports federation governing bodies in India could potentially be on the lookout for professional sports managers. Some even have full paid CEOs, BCCI, and Hockey India, for example. So all this seems to indicate an upsurge in the Indian sports industry. Having said that, and before we go any further, I just want to give you 2 pointers. One in terms of size and one in terms of performance. In terms of size, I know if everybody is aware of this, but globally, the sports sector is bigger than the luxury sector. So it says a lot in terms of size and in terms of appeal. In terms of performance, now if we narrow it down to India, I just want to give you a quick pointer, and this was given by one of our contestants yesterday on a panel. So I thought it was very apt to bring it back into the subject. He had a slide, or she had a slide, that was pointing out to the following. India has 1.4 billion people, obviously, and in the Olympic run, it gathered 35 Olympic medals. Michael Phelps has 28 medals. India had 10 gold medals. Michael Phelps had 23 medals. So I think it was important to give you the pointers in these 2 directions. So before we talk about the management challenge and the need of professional at various skill levels that will take care of, I believe, monetization, governance, accountability, and transparency, which are the main drivers of the sector, let's first talk about the mindset. Doesn't the problem go much deeper than the shortage of cash or organization? Why is sports in India rarely at the top of anyone's agenda? Why has sports always taken a backseat vis-a-vis education? What needs to be done to change that perception and accelerate the transition in this sector? This is an open question, and whoever wants to jump in and take it, please do so. If not, I will assign it to somebody. So you better be on with me on this one.
I'm happy to jump in.
Wonderful, I appreciate that.
And I think I'm just going to kind of base the answer on my experience within the sector. And when I decided, say, to do my master's in sports business, this is back in 2008, there were no schools in India, for example, none catering to that particular area. And what I realized back then and now we've seen over the past decade or so where how it's changed in terms of needing specialized skilled labor for the industry. And having then studied in the US, I realized how mature that market is. And you gave sort of Phelps as an example. It's purely because one is, of course, the culture, but then the specialized learning that's happened outside India. And I think what's happening now here, I mean, you can see what say Xavier M. Leon is doing, and you have many other programs now in the country focused on trying to bring in skilled labor, because initially it was very generic, general managers as part of sports organizations on the administration side, as well as events, etc. But now you have extremely, I mean, professionals who need to know very specific tasks and fill in specific roles. And I think the industry currently is headed in that direction. Of course, there's a lot of work to do to get us there. And I think of course Julian will have a very interesting view because of, I mean, looking at it from the outside in, and having spent some time in India. But right now, of course, we are headed in the right direction, and we are finding our feet in terms of getting specialized talent and people who understand sport at various levels, not generic, but extremely specific.
Thank you, Arup. Julian, would you like to step in and give your perspective from, as Arup said, from an outside point of view, although you've been in the industry inside as well. So that's why I think it's very important to have you on this panel.
Yeah, thank you, Arup. Thank you, Ashley. Yeah, what it for me, it's a lot of grassroots projects in India, a wonderful grassroots project with people with a lot of passion and motivation. But I think to change the scale, to go to a state level and the country level, I think it requires, like Arup said, some not some necessarily from sports specific expertise, but rather bringing people together, bringing institutions together. And I think what is difficult, and I think Odisha is a good start, I think, as a good example, is to bring institutions, the sport movement, companies together to be able to go to a bigger scale. And I think this is, I mean, we can take example of events, of a grassroots program, of a high performance program. And I think what is the key for me, and I had the opportunity also to have some, to give some courses in Indian institution as well, is to understand, to be able to understand all stakeholders' expectation, to be able to build programs that gather people, gather institutions to go to a bigger scale, because one stakeholder alone cannot run on the long term. It's not possible to run at a state level program or whatever. So you need to bring, I would say, at least 3 kind of institutions. It's public institutions, sport movement, and private sector. And I think this requires some skills, not only operational skills, but management skills to be able to build joint projects.
Thank you, Julian. I would like to have two perspectives to add on. First of all, if I could ask, Gautam from Decathlon. He's obviously, at the heart of this corporate sector, because Julian talked about public, private, national sports federations relationship. I would like to have the point of view of a private sector player, and also if Aritra could also jump in and give another perspective from a private sector. And last but not least, Rajiv, you're at the heart of all this. Why are sports youngsters pulling out of sports of the sports sector in industry? So all three of you, if you could step by step lead us through this very complicated issue.
Thanks, Ashley. Just to share my perspective, one thing has been that it was very important that sports became a viable career alternative, like we see in other countries where that has always been a challenge. In India, maybe to an extent, cricket was a financially viable. Also, at the same time, if you could make a career out of sports, that was one of the key sports. But now, with more and more exposure to a lot of different sports, people looking at sports from the angle of also health and fitness, not just as practice or leisure or hobby. More and more what we see in the market, I've been with Decathlon for about 10 years, from those days to till now, we see a changing behavior trend in terms of people looking at different sports, not just the conventional sports that is being practiced, but looking at sports as not for professional careers, but also as leisure, hobby, wellness, fitness, mental well-being, etc., to make it essentially a part of their life. And we do have a long way to go in terms of reaching the larger audience. And I think that is where a lot of opportunity is also going to come in, with not just the variety of sports being picked up, more opportunities for manufacturers also to cater to the needs of different sports. For example, let's say cycling, which has been one of the sports that has been picking up a lot. Not just running is another sport. You see a lot of practice of skating, roller skating, etc., and that is where new avenues are also going to come up, along with people trying to explore a lot of different sports. And I think that is where the penetration and change in consumer behavior is also going to happen. From private sector perspective, this opens up a huge opportunity for us also to have passionate people exploring different sports come into different fields. So I'm just taking an example of Decathlon, where we feel that, okay, if you're passionate about some sport, then working around it and creating a career out of it becomes much easier for you, because you are always in touch with the customer and you understand the final customer per se. So I think that is where the industry overall is going. The practice of sport is also going. We have, like you're saying, only about 5% in India still practice sport, and at a very professional level, or getting a career out of it is still a challenge. But we have seen this trend. I think with COVID also, with a few mindset shifts, this is improving a lot.
Thank you, Gaurav. Aditya?
Yeah. So just building on what people have been saying, right? One, I think there is, for the first time, a structured pathway from grassroots to the top in India, which did not exist maybe say 10, 15 years back. Right? And, what Gautam was talking about, where there is a consumer behavior shift happening, right? And I remember whenever we speak about, say, what does a football academy need to do, say, or any sports academy need to do to grow business, right? And I'm talking about the grassroots that is going to feed talent into the top level. And this is a topic that keeps coming up. Who is the competitor, right? And I feel there has been at some points a myopic understanding of the competition, because for a parent of a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, the decision is between sending my child for 30 minutes to a French class or a football session, right? And that is where the behavioral shift needs to happen first. And I think finally it's happening. Us with Marva Sports, what we've been trying to do, and we've been always working in the grassroots, because we've thought the basement of the pyramid needs to be strengthened first, right? And that is why we've been looking at how even, say, introducing technology, right? Now, if you look at mostly what has happened in this country, it's always been top-down approach, right? So grassroots generally gets priced out when it comes to technology, right? Now, this is also seen when you're looking at, say, recruitment or hiring, right? Because now there are so many opportunities, experts are needed, but we've been working in this space for some time. Some of you all have been working in this space for a long time. You've always noticed this, right? There is a gap in between the expectation of people working in the space and what we're actually getting. So, and this is where colleges like yours come into play as well, where you're doing upskilling, right? A lot of upskilling needs to happen for the industry in general, talent that is coming in. You spoke about public-private partnerships, and we as a private player, we've been working in the space of infrastructure for a long time. That's where primarily we've grown as a company. But apart from that, we've also been looking at introducing technology into the grassroots, right? So we have a robust sports technology investment program, through which we generally look at early stage sports technology companies with a general idea of strengthening the ecosystem, right? can I put my hand up and say that the public policies today are really strong and it actually invites us private players? Unfortunately, no. That's, I think, where it needs to start as well. The dialogue between the public and the private companies to understand how this pathway can be strengthened, right?
Okay, appreciate that. Rajiv?
Thanks, Ashley, and lovely to hear whatever has been said so far. I think it's a great momentum to the topic. Just part of my opening statement, and particularly to the question that you raised, that why youngsters are pulling out. You're not really, what are the reasons for them to pull out of the sports industry that they get in? My early comment would be, obviously, we are in an ever-developing country. The last few kind of exciting professions being pursued by youngsters. We are no longer a career-oriented youth who would probably opt for MBAs and the doctorates and the engineering of the world. They have something to pursue in sports, and sports has taken a great boom ever since the emergence of IPL, as we would agree, most of us, in 2008. So the opportunities have been galore. But on the other hand, there have been great challenges also. And obviously, can this youth take up the roles ranging from marketing, finance, event management, brand development, digital media, those kind of things? That's the demand part. But there is a question of demand and supply, in this context. And are we able to meet that, or are we able to feed good enough to meet that? That's where we stand. And there are, if I may just say, the management challenges. Is the structure and the system in place to provide the youngsters with the required amount of skilled training? That's the question we need to ask. Are the interns or the trainees who enter the industry getting enough attention? Because that's the crop that you are going to groom, and that's the one who's going to serve you. And what is the purpose of hiring them? That's important also. So these are some of the questions, which one needs to ponder about. Obviously, the industries needs to put upon a structure in where the mentor needs to take up the responsibility to look after the young professionals and guide them in every possible way for them to grow and improve. Because this is a very, very, nascent stage for all these youngsters who've coming to terms in terms of experiencing this lovely wave of sports opportunities through the sports management route. And there is a mindset challenge also. While we talk about the management, there is a mindset challenge also, which is from the youngsters' perspective. This is something which we need to look about from both needs. Something which needs to be made clear is the fact that working as a sports manager does not mean a lavish life around the athlete. We get overawed while we are at work. These youngsters coming in could have a very different mindset altogether. It's not about job in hand first. Let's get that done. Let's get all the experience and then talk about something else. So this is a misconception which needs to be cleared as early as possible when we are guiding these young youth towards that career that we all want them to pursue, and they are the talent and they are the future for us. It's also the fact that most of the youngsters who pursue career in sports management are once an athlete or linked with some sport or the other, which gives them the kind of the added advantage and the passion, as earlier speaker was also mentioning. It's about passion also. But does the passion only relates them to motivate them to deliver that what they want? Because if the interns are not paid, unpaid internship is not going to do any good to them. Ultimately, that's not going to pay their bills, and that's not going to help them in the longer run. So we need to motivate. It needs to go hand in glove. We need to try and prepare these youth for the future rather than get the work done out of them, because we are still in an organized stage. We are not organized as yet. That's what I would like to say.
Thank you, Rajiv. Listening to you guys, I see a lot of similarities in the answers. But, if I could just, sum it up from my perspective, obviously, a lot of things stem up from at the grassroots level. I mean, grassroots is a very important thing. We need to, I mean, there is a need to broaden the base. And what I've heard also is that grassroots is also very much linked to the environment and to the culture. Okay, the culture is an important integral part of the practice. If you don't have, if culturally you're not accustomed to doing sports or playing sports, it becomes difficult to broaden the base. Once you've talked about the base, you also have the top of the pyramid. So everybody concentrates on the 1% of the athletes that make it and are the flagship bearers of the sector. My question to you guys is a very simple one. Why is there a lack of representation at the top, and at the same time a lack of monetization at the bottom? Because if there is no, to come back on what Rajiv just said, if the sector cannot monetize the overall playing field, how can we get people to be interested in coming to the sector in the first place? And if there are not increasingly important drivers or motors like at the top, okay, how can we do that? I know it's a very tricky question, but I'm here to challenge your bright mind. So I'm sorry to be poking the bear, if I can say so, but I would really like you guys to help me out on this one. And by the way, since we're talking about everybody pitching in, there are a lot of great programs out there, okay, that are helping students understand the dynamics of this nascent sector in India. But I believe that perhaps there's something else that could be done to increase the speed of transition. So would someone like to take this one? Sure, Arthur, please.
So I think to begin with, we've all got to understand this is not going to happen overnight, right? I mean, this is something that people keep speaking about, that how can we get to monetization fast? I think monetization comes way after you have even that base of fans in the first place, right? When you look at mature markets like, say, North American markets or the European markets, customers, the market in itself is mature, right? The customers are willing to part with money to engage with the brand. That doesn't exist in India, right? We've seen the Nikes and the Adidas come in and try sell 4,500 jerseys, and they don't sell. Right? I remember going to India football matches where the moment you get out of the metro, somebody's selling 150 rupee bootleg t-shirt. So monetization is not going to happen overnight, obviously. Also, where does it come from? I feel government bodies, and also government bodies that are essentially organizing tournaments, even private bodies that are organizing tournaments, need to look at the longer picture, right? I mean, if I were to give the example of, say, ISL, if you look at how ISL is run, it has pretty much priced out a lot of smaller clubs that are working in the grassroots and want to go and take that level up. Now, do I see why ISL and the organizing body is doing it? Obviously, because without money, if there isn't that pool of money to back you, you're not building a strong enough product, right? And we've seen so many football clubs in India dying, which the moment there is no longevity, the industry's perception is hurt as well, right? So to talk about monetization, again, I feel like first there has to be a shift in policies that essentially allow more private parties to come on board, have longer term engagement plans with fans. And that is where I think the fan finally starts engaging with money, right? I mean, sports is an emotional connection for all people, right? So once you have them connected to the product, it is now about building loyalty. Now, I think that's where the industry has suffered till now, where there isn't enough loyalty built in. So I think who does it, who moves the needle, I'm not very sure. But I think from my perspective, that's what I think.
Gautam, would you like to pitch in? Because I think you're at the heart of.
Yes, Ashley. Specific to the monetization part, just looking at overall trajectory, One key thing that we need to understand is the monetization may not yet happen with just core sporting products or core sporting goods. We'll have to leverage the consumer shift that is happening. You'll have to see, for example, I am a yoga practitioner. Yoga is still a sport, but in India, we'll look at core sports, cricket, hockey, all the equipments related to it, all the manufacturing support ecosystem. The organizations are still around a lot of core sports and equipments. But how the market is evolving is it is moving towards, or the mass are people who are still using sports as an experience, leisure, hobby, exploring new sports. They are moving, or their entry to understand sports is could still be at a later stage. If you're still looking at that young age market, who are going to go from in a specific sport from beginner to advanced to intermediate, go through the normal route of playing for say districts, states, etc. That is still a very competitive industry. But the bigger market is where you still have a lot of people wanting to experience sport. They may have the interest, they may want to do something, and how do you cater to that? For example, segments like athleisure, where you're still using those products. They're not going to run or practice a marathon, but they'll still be wanting to do a 5-kilometer run. They may not run a marathon overall, but they are still wanting to explore. They need those kind of products, etc., where they want to have sports as an integral part of their life, but not to the level of making a competitive career. That part is where people who are wanting to make competitive sports as a career is still a very saturated market. But to really expand, you will have to see how do you cater to the masses who have that interest, who have limited time, and who want to explore a lot more sports across the platform. And that is where the monetization is going to happen. Now, simple example, we have a lot of examples in the industry. For example, HRX as a brand, Myntra, purely athleisure. They don't sell, and they're built an entire brand out of just athleisure. With COVID, etc., fitness has also become a very important part and parcel of a lot of people's life. So that is where this is going to happen, and that is where the opportunity is also going. Like, you will have to still look at core sports, but you will have to look at the wider market and what the masses are going to be.
Thank you for that. Julien, would you like to share some insight from a foreign perspective?
Yes, the question of monetization is, I would say, a daily priority for sport, and I think every economic sector. But I think the monetization challenges are very different from, I would say, three sub-sector. I would say the first one is, of course, the grassroots, as we mentioned, and the monetization with the participants. The second is more high performance. I would say the pathway to elite and professional sport, but other athletes. And I think the third subsector is sport like entertainment, with a very like private leagues, with media, and the streams of revenue are very different from the three subsectors. And I think to connect the three subsectors is something for I would say, independently of the monetization, is something for, like you mentioned at the first question, to upscale the sport, is try to develop at the same pace or not independently the three subsectors. And in terms of monetization, then I think some sponsors, and Decathlon is a good example, because they recently became a national sponsor for Paris 2024. So they are more, I would say, the entertainment sponsor, like a sponsor of but with the goals to strengthen their grassroots positioning. And correct me, Godam, if I'm wrong, but it's a new shift also for Decathlon. Yet I think it's very interesting to see how to monetize their grassroots as well, their grassroots I would say activity, with also some connection with the high performance and sport with the entertainment. And I think the monetization, what is interesting as well in the sport sector, is to connect the three subsectors and try to find new streams of revenue. And I think, like I mentioned before, but for example, sport policies, and not because I'm with Odisha State as well as a partner of of the event, but it's something that is really interesting for a public state in India, for example, to try to connect all of this and to find synergies in terms of reach and monetization.
Julien, I'm really glad, because I mean I totally concur with what you said, and I would like to point out to ask two of the panelists to pitch in once again. You mentioned Decathlon, and I'm pretty proud that they were our partners from day one, and as far as the XCBS program is concerned, and trying to mix both the aspects of the pyramid. When I talked about the top and the bottom, you talked about top, which is basically performance and entertainment, and bottom is basically grassroots. There is something very peculiar in the Indian market that could add a lot of momentum to bridging the gap that you just mentioned, and that's the CSR policies. You see, to the best of my knowledge, India is the only country in the world that makes CSR investment compulsory. So, and full disclosure, when I was looking at coming to India with EM Lyon Business School, that was the angle that I found very interesting in trying to understand the dynamics of the market. So I think there are people who would like to pitch in on this, but how can the CSR part of the public policy that you've just mentioned be a driver to create this broad base and upscale and upskill the whole segment? Perhaps Rajiv, you're in the middle of all this, and Arup, you could take the lead on this one.
So Arup, would you like to go, or should I?
Go ahead, Rajiv. I'll follow up after you.
So interesting point. Actually, Ashley, the first and foremost point I would like to add to what Julien said. I think I totally agree with his summing up of the subject. But I think there is one more sub-industry, which is the fantasy sport. Because when we're talking about the entertainment, how to get people to embrace sport in whatever fashion, and then obviously add to the kitty also, I think fantasy sports through the gaming route and all is gaining such great momentum. And in this context, obviously, COVID has also multiplied that in terms of the interest generation. But having said that, it's there to stay, and it's there to grow in a very rapid pace. The figures that we see from Indian fantasy sports report, it actually is very, very encouraging. It's really moving in the right direction. But coming to the point of corporates through the CSR route, obviously, as we all know, that there is a certain percentage, a couple of 2% or so, which each corporate needs to also work towards the CSR. Most, as it is seen, that most of the corporates are, the leading ones are pumping in about a percentage of their profit into sports for the development of sports. And that's where I think this public-private partnership that we talked about earlier, which makes great sense. And that's where, because it's not the sole responsibility of the governments to take the momentum forward, because governments are generally, typically, with all due respect, they are there to run the sport for the sake of running the sport or for the infrastructure that they have. It's the interest of the corporates, for the people at large, for the masses at large, to come forward, join hands, and then take it forward. Because the professional part is something which is where corporates can play a very big role, because governments would give them all the infrastructure, all the support that they want, and make sure that the ingredients are all there. But I think the real dish has to come out from the corporates per se, in terms of the partnership that they can bring and the value they can bring. Just taking a lead from the corporate I represent, Tatas, as you would know, the heritage of sports that the Tatas bring in. It's only with the philosophy of a founder that what comes from society should go back to society. That's the belief that the group has. And that's the belief I think most of the groups should have with whatever quantum of success that they have achieved over the years. And that's where it goes back to society, it goes back to masses, it goes back to younger generation. India is a relatively youth nation, and that's where I think we need to focus on. and the resources going in that direction, like in our case, even for the case of Jamshedpur FC, as you know that we ventured into that in 2017, and this year they tasted success being the champions of the league. It took them about 5 years or so, but there was a hard work, there was a lot of involvement, a lot of engagement, a lot of investment which went into it to raise the bar. And I think this is where, in the larger perspective, most corporates should come forward and take a plunge to either take a ownership of a sport or multiple sports at large and take it forward.
But don't you think that's Arup, before you go into that, I give you the mic. Don't you think that's exactly what the Orissa government has been doing in pioneering private partnerships, private-public partnerships, and with the high-performance centers, et cetera, et cetera? Isn't that a model that could be substantiated and developed, Arup?
Completely, and I'm gonna, go back to your sort of earlier question is why is there lack of representation at the top? And I think Aritra mentioned it in his earlier answer, which is the current top-down approach which exists needs to be flipped on its head, and this whole everybody's mentioned the word grassroots, but how do you then sort of really tap into that bottom section of sport? I'll jump to the Odisha part of it in a bit, but we've seen tournaments, say like the Under-17 World Cup, and happening in 2017. We have another Under-17 World Cup happening this year. My personal opinion is, us as a nation, that should be a cap in terms of international competitions we are going after. There's talk about Youth Olympics, talk about Olympics, etc. But in fact, we should be trying to spend money on infrastructure development, on all of this at the lowest level. And if you draw parallels to, say, the US, for example, you have the NCAA, which is, and you asked the question about why is there no monetization at the bottom. That's the perfect example, right? They have college sports, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And honestly, if you look at India, the amount of schools, colleges, the base exists. We have such a large 300 million plus youth, and that's where actually the monetization exists. And what's happening is, the good part is things like Halo India, and of course model states like Odisha are coming in to bring this sort of base at the bottom, which is great to see. I'll also give you a fantastic example. You talked about CSR, JSW Sport with the Inspire Institute, right? That institute is purely run on CSR funds from multiple stakeholders, which is fantastic. And that tells you that this gap can be bridged across multiple levels. Of course, you need to have every corporate having the philosophy of the Tatas. I completely agree, because people need to give back. We have so many unicorns now. And they should be thinking of sort of giving back. But I'll kind of wrap up with your point about Odisha. It is the model state, whether you believe it or not. But at the same time, even though, say, they're going to be a host to the FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup, of course, they host to the World Cup, Hockey World Cup next year. Perfect example. But at the same time, now we need to figure out, okay, at the lowest level, figure out how, okay, hosting international events at this kind of level, but let's look at grade 12, 11, 12, 13. That's the sort of age group that we need to start looking at high performance and really figuring out how to bridge the gap where those kids are the ones coming up to the next level with all the sort of partnerships that they're putting across in terms of swimming, with the Abhinav Bindra Foundation, and multiple other sports. And I think we're headed there. And I'll go back to, I think, what I said right in the beginning, where specialized staff, professionals, again, Odisha has shown very clearly that if you put the right people in the right positions, you'll get results, right? And these are people who know what they're doing, who are capable of taking decisions. And then those people at the top are also hiring the right people at the bottom. You're not just sort of, okay, figuring out, you're hiring professionals. And I think that sort of eventually is really going to see us move the needle, across the nation. And yeah, it's the next 2 decades, but yeah, we got to be patient.
Arup, thank you for this. We all, I mean, at the beginning, I talked about monetization, so we concentrated on that. But I also talked about governance, accountability, and transparency. And what you just have touched upon when you said right people in the right place, etc. It's also a matter of accountability, governance, sports governance. Now, I will not ask you to commentate on this, but something struck me very recently, and I just want to touch upon the subject. Once again, I don't want any comment because it's not the purpose. I mean, it's not the crux of my question. But I came to read that the Madras High Court recently came up with a judgment, an order, saying that only athletes. I don't have the order in front of me, but apparently the essence of the order was that the federations should be run by sports people. My question to you, I'm not once again asking you to commentate on a court order, but don't you think that in India in particular, there is this sort of misconception that sports federations, sports governance have to be taken up by sports people, which, by the way, creates the ambiguity that doesn't give room for management, or, as you said, for competencies that are needed in order to grow the market. Now, this is a very difficult one, I know, but Eritrea, perhaps, or Julien as well. Could you please give us your insight on this?
I can take. I am not in India, so I can take some risk answering the question. No, for me, it's a criteria, and I mean, I used to hire some people. So I used to have a consultant who was a former captain of the French national team in volleyball, youth team. And she had the passion for sport, and she understands the pathway to elite because she lived from the inside experience. So it's a criteria, but it should not be any requirement, because for me it doesn't make any sense to use it as one of the criteria, and because it's a key to understand and to have the passion of sport. But on the other hand, we need rationale in sport. We have the emotion, we have the passion, but we need some rationale. And with Arup, we met 3 years ago, I think, the government of Odisha. And what struck me, it's very, very rational on sport. And it's easier to sign with a state or with a city in France with the mayor is passionate of sport. But at the end, it will be very difficult to deliver a good event only with passion, without any rationale. So I think, to answer the question, I think for me it's a good factor to take into consideration, because people understand the sector, have experience. But for sure, it should not be a requirement or something that prevent people from entering the sports sector. And even in the governance, I am not sure. I mean, you have good example of former sports people becoming really good executive in sport. And Etienne, we mentioned the CEO of Paris 2024 is a former Olympian in badminton, so he knows sport. Tony Estanguet is also a good example. But you have also people, and I will take some. I mean, many people, maybe the best sport executive are not former sportsmen or sportswomen. They can be just people from the market, from the business sector, for the public sector. So of course, it's something useful and insightful, but it should not be something that is compulsory for me, even in the governance.
I'll venture an answer as well. So
Please.
I think initially when Arup also spoke about this, right? You need professional experts, and the word subject matter expertise gets bandied around a lot. And just because I was a good drag flicker or because I was a good penalty taker, does that make me a good management executive? I don't think so, right? So is the answer that binary though? Is it a yes or a no answer? I mean, Julian also mentioned some examples, and I'm a huge fan of football. I keep quoting the example of Van der Sar. Once he retired, he did a 2-year course at the Johan Cruyff Institute of Management and then jumped into management. So again, it's about pathways, right? What skills are transferable? Obviously, that's the understanding of the ecosystem, but can a sports person actually run a model? Can a sports person actually even use an Excel sheet or read data, right? I mean, that's the gap right now, and that needs to be bridged. So if government bodies are mandating a thing like this, where they say, it's only sports people that need to be running federations, I also think upskilling programs need to happen. Because if you think about governance, right, and as a public body, and you're going to be inviting private bodies, who's setting the KPIs? I mean, we keep speaking, whenever somebody says, okay, what's happening to the sports industry, the first thing that's thrown about it, we don't have medals, we don't win. Whose work is it? I mean, if it is a public-private partnership, it's the governance, it's the government body that dictates what the KPI is of the private engagement, right? If you are to deploy, say, 200 crores of CSR money, what is to be done with it? We have panel members from private organizations as well. And this is a question for me, as well as all of the other people on the panel. Have we ourselves done enough when we say we are trying to bridge the gap, right? I mean, the top-down approach has worked in India, but again, it's just, I mean, talent today exists in silos, unfortunately, and there is no way to tap into it. And this is sporting talent, this is management talent, this is interested people, right? It's just not there, and we don't have those kind of networks. So, I mean, if such rules are to be put in place, I also feel it's a good thing, because then it also puts the onus squarely on the government body trying to do it. But then you need upskilling, right? I mean, if that right amount of upskilling happens, I feel we can have a proper longer term strategy. I mean, and we've seen this, right? The Japanese women's football team, they had a 10-year plan and they succeeded in doing what they set out to do. So whereas all we've been having is every 10 years we have a new person and we have a new 10-year plan, and it's just been going on, right? So yeah, that's my take.
At XCBS, we are part of the question, and we are also part of the solution. So let me flip that question. What do you think should be done? Everybody's talking about upscaling and creating professionals and so on. So what should be done? What could be done? What hasn't been done that would help private sector, NGOs, public sector get the right professionals in order to fuel the transition? That would be probably my last question. I think we're running out of time. As far as I'm concerned, and perhaps we can take some questions from the audience if we have some. But what is the need of the moment that what is the demand of the market that is not being addressed by organizations or by institutions like us? Rajiv? Godam?
Yeah, Ashley, first of all, I would like to touch upon on the previous one also. It's a very interesting
Absolutely.
one.
Sorry.
Let me be the devil's advocate and spell it out. There are two ways of looking at it. One is the top end, where we are talking about the federations and the associations being run by the so-called technical capability people, or people who are aligned to sports, if we're talking about the subject sports. Now, that doesn't take away anything from the politician getting involved, provided he has the ingredients and means to be there in a very fair capacity, which is to be debated again. Sorry to say that. But having said that, the second leg, which is, I won't say the bottom end of it, but the second leg is where you actually hire the right kind of people. And who is going to have that mindset and the approvals to give to ensure that you get the right people. Now, let me give you a small example. When privates get involved in any partnership, they would always want to go with the merit. I mean, largely it would always be, somebody who's best in the business with the proven credentials is what takes the job. It's not about a guy played that sport or not played that sport. Now, that's the way it runs, and that's the way it should run. But what happens is we are coming from a culture where we are influenced by many factors. Now, it could be somebody at the top, it could be the system, it could be the ecosystem, it could be anything. I think Aritra, everybody you should be the right people to know, because you're going and meeting so many people and interacting with them for such cause. So my take on this is, yes, there has to be a merit factor involved when it comes to this kind of governance. And this is where privates play a very important role. Any leagues or any big entities, flagship events run by the privates, I am not advocating for them being working for a private organization, but I'm just saying technically and typically the way that is run in the most professional manner. If you see the ISLs and the IPLs of the world, you actually have people with those credentials. You just can't say a guy who's leading an entity or a franchise, he's been just an ex-cricketer or an ex-footballer or a sportsman per se. So it is. But on the other hand, I would also say you need to have the right blend also. You would need the experience of a person who knows the sport also, because you just can't go with one against another. You have to have a very good balance of it, but you have to have the right set of people at the top so that they can take the right policy decisions. They can disseminate that into the system where you can get coming up to regionals, to the high performance levels. How is that going to happen if you don't have that mindset to take it right from the bottom to the top, in the manner that it needs to be done, without having any political interference, without having any other ulterior motive or whatever, so that's the real sense. And I feel that is where it makes the whole difference, in my view.
Thank you, Rajiv. Gautam?
Yeah, Ashley. Just getting back to your original question in terms of overall consolidation, I think the key will be to have a bit of organization, because right from manufacturing to the different sports having different organizations, overall sports practice, it's still very unorganized, where the consolidation overall is yet to happen. That consolidation maybe could be driven from top down, but at the grassroots, that consolidation could still happen through all the private sector, NGOs, etc. If we have a common vision, I still feel right now there is so much of entry barriers, right, in terms of practice, facilities, cost of products for the larger audience, and that is where that could be a common vision for everybody to solve. How do you reduce the entry barrier for sport in the country? Work together, could have a common vision across, try to consolidate all these sectors, because right now it's always about, okay, what is in it for me? How am I adding value to in certain silos, or dependent on the public sector, government, etc., to then drive it as top down. But overall, if you have to say that, okay, consolidate and have a common vision, I think that could be done. And one key challenge to address could be that how do you reduce the entry barrier and encourage more practice of sports at the grassroots, finally, which will then lead to the normal trek in terms of overall sporting ability as a country.
Thank you very much. So to probably wrap it up, I think we all agreed that what fuels the sector at the core is passion. I mean, sports is an industry, sports is an economy, but I think it's a completely, well, I wouldn't say completely, but it's a different type of economy and industry, because at the core of all of it, it is passion, it is participation. And there's something we couldn't touch upon, but it's about experience, customer experience, being part of it. And that's something that is probably going to be addressed in another session, which is about sports and entertainment, because I also strongly believe, and this is something that perhaps we could take forward, all of us, or in combination. But I also believe that India can also add value to sports and entertainment, because sports is big in India and entertainment is big in India as well, and there could be an Indian signature to sports and entertainment. That's something that could add to monetization, I guess, as well, and it could also fuel passion. Another thing I would like to understand, probably point out, is technology. Technology has not been, something that we've talked a lot about, but in India, like in other sectors, technology has enabled the country to move forward faster and cut the entry barriers that you've just mentioned. And perhaps technology can add a lot of value to the consolidation of the market, and once again to the monetization and to the spreading of the culture, of sporting culture as a whole. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for this very, very interesting session. It was very insightful. I thank all of you for the honesty of your approach, the very once again insightful information that you shared, and I hope that we are all contributing to creating this incredible and insightful sporting ecosystem. And I cannot finish without once again underlining the incredible job that has been done by the government of Orissa in creating this incredible ecosystem. And thank you all for joining.
No, we Ashley, okay, I think but there's a question which I wanted to, so I didn't.
I'm sorry, I did not have the question, so I couldn't.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It just came right away, so I didn't want to interrupt you while you were speaking. So this is a question for the panel. They've not. It's from Dheeraj, and it's not directed to a particular panelist, so anybody could take this. So the question is, how do you see the industry trends changing with the kicking in of Web 3.0 and multiple movements in the meta world?
Technology.
So who's gonna take that?
I would love to take it because this is a space we've been working in. So
sure.
Web3 in general has been something that we're looking at as an investment. The investment arm of our company has been looking at that. So I think we spoke about monetization, right? And again, it certainly helps engage with the fans and customers with another added layer when you're looking at metaverse. There are many in organization today, like one of our portfolio companies started off being a fan engagement platform, which was then acquired by a company in the US. Again, for me, the answer to that question would be there are going to be added, obviously, opportunities of engagement, but for me, quite honestly, this is too early for India. And we've not yet gotten there. Web3 is something that not really everybody understands. So creating products on that layer will take some time. But in maybe say the next 5 years, if this is still around and it's not just a fad globally, I see, yes, engagement kicking in, monetization happening as well with that.
All right. Anybody else would like to add anything to that? We also have a Dean XCBS, Professor Arun.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Professor Arun from XCBS and Exim University, Indian counterpart of XCBS. It's a very interesting 1.5 hours almost discussion. I have a quick 3 points and maybe questions as well. That was our chairman, Joint Board XCBS mentioned that India being 1.4 billion plus. But is that a strength or is that a weakness? It's a very kind of a controversial, kind of a debatable issue, because let's say Indian government has to provide free vaccination for 1.4 billion people. Imagine the scale of the problem, scale of the money that is involved. And for various political or other reasons that has to be done, free vaccination. So the entire focus changes from the sports, let's say, to some other social need. Second is the kind of biased or lopsided approach. The Olympic, which happens every 4 years, 100 of countries involved, 100 of sports discipline involved, it's about $4.5–5 billion US dollar. And look at IPL, it happens every year, only one sports, one country because the players come from different countries. 5 years, the right would be spent, be auctioned about $6 billion. Now see, one sports cricket, $6 billion in 5 years, and Olympic, 4 years, $4.5 billion. So that's why the small town talents are towards IPL and not towards swimming or becoming a Michael Phelps, because the number of Olympic medals is not counted anywhere. for whatever reasons, good or bad. So how do you sort of try to correct or adjust that? And third point is coming to professional management. And I'm sure Mr. Rajiv will forgive me. The BCCI appointments, the top, is always political. Whether it's Rajiv Shukla or this, I'm not judging their capabilities, but first possibly angle is the political sort of assignment. And that's what kind of brings down, if I may say so, the kind of, so if I become a sports management professional, where would I go? I mean, is the political route better than the technical route or expertise route? That could be a sort of big debatable point again. So there are the three broad comments. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting panel discussion that you had.
So Professor Sir, I would, yeah, so Diksha, just I will add to the last part, not because it's concerning cricket, just to set the facts right, that Mr. Shukla could be representing an association who's an affiliated unit of BCCI. So BCCI structure works in a very different form, as which you would know, sir. So it has obviously the element of a very strong body, affiliated bodies structure, which is what runs the organization, the parent organization. But when it comes to what we were talking about, is any leading organization or a leading federation would probably want to look at the best guy to be their CEO or somebody who's running at the helm of it. There always will be a guiding forces behind, which you would know yourself also in the system, that it has to work with certain, certain structures, certain ideology and stuff like that. But there is no right and wrong there, to be very frank. It's just that you need to have the right blend of people to be at the helm of an organization running the larger interest of the masses and the sport. And obviously cricket takes the cake because of the fact that I know that it meets the eyeballs more than any other sport. It runs into the blood of every little youth because it is seen. It is seen and felt. It could be the viewership, it could be the other elements that we talk about. This is the real challenge for other sports. How do we bring them to that level that they can even have anything close or at par with the sport which is getting all the eyeballs? I mean, in the global parlance, it's all soccer, and it's other sports also. Even rugby has a very big presence. So it's how we market this, how we present this, how we position this product as a sport, and with no means, if all these professional leagues that have come up over the last few years, they've done real good to all other sports. From scratch, they have grown to a sizable number, and which I'm sure Aritra and Arup would second me on that there has been a sea change. But to equate one sport with another would not be fair for various other reasons that sport brings to table. Even if you and me would not want to recognize that, but we have no choice, because that's the way it has been accepted by the youth and the masses. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, yesterday we had the discussion, cricket and others or cricket versus others. It has to be cricket and others, not versus others. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Professor Arun, just quickly adding to this, this is where we are seeing, at least in the last decade, a lot of shift in the new generation trying to explore a lot more sports. And I think that is where one thing where we can really look at it's some sports are still very expensive in India to practice. Say, for example, tennis, swimming. Facilities to products overall is still a very expensive sport compared to cricket, where you just need a bat and ball to start off. So that is where I think becomes important that shift is happening with the next generation, maybe. And once more people start taking up a lot of these sports, that is when the cricket and others will also come into existence.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, I think we're talking of cricket, and before we end this, there's one more. Cricket is a topic when everybody is interested, and you get questions as well. So we've got another question, and this is from Tazeen. She's in fact a sports journalist as well. So she says, from a marketing point of view, how to address the dynamism of the sector. The IPL, for example, which changed the sports scenario, she feels is now also facing issues in a fall in viewership. In sports, one medal or win can change the whole scenario. The take of the panel on this.
I can jump in here if I'm audible. And I'm going to use sort of the FIFA Under-17 World Cup as a case study because it's out there and it's there for learning for everybody. And since I sort of headed the marketing for that project, the thing here is we need to understand, and Professor mentioned this 1.5 or 4 billion. That number just sort of intimidates everybody, but it isn't actually the real scenario. We need to go down to a very sort of local level to be able to market sport as a whole. And I give you the example of the Under-17 World Cup. Why? Because we were dealing with 6 state governments that spoke 6 different languages, 8 different foods. And when you think about an organization like FIFA coming here, they then realized, they were thinking 1.4 billion, but then realized, oh no, we are actually dealing with almost 6 different countries, because everything that these people do within these states is different. The way they actually even perceive sport and consume it is also different. So the marketing in India specifically is very different compared to anywhere else in the world. It's not one size fits all. You have to go very local level to be able to really get your bang for your buck in terms of commercialization. And I think Gautam would also corroborate on this because they probably see very different sort of buying trends in different states, I would imagine, and how people sort of are in fact even playing sports in these states. So I think it's really important to understand IPL. Yes, of course, now it's this big monster from a cricket perspective, but it's fantastic from a sports point of view for the country. It's putting us on a very on an international level, and you might think viewership is dropping, but you'd be surprised to know that from a broadcast 10-second spot, and I was discussing this with a person in the industry, 10 seconds per ad when IPL started was about 3.5 lakhs, is now 16.5 lakhs, and that's across all these years. And every single time people have said, oh, it's too expensive, but the ads get sold out. What I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, we really need to figure out how to market at the local level. And right now, I would think an IPL is a great example, but not something also for other sports really emulate, because other sports are different. It's not like cricket versus other sports. Yes, it is, but other sports are at very different life stages in our country. So I think that's also very important to understand as an audience.
I think Odisha state government has recently announced that all 30 district schools will have a special hockey setup. So they are providing money, they're providing infrastructure, they're providing technical support, skill support, everything. So each district school will have to start with a coach, a facility, a playground, all kind of provided by the state government. I think that's a brilliant move to catch, at the grassroots level, the talent and then promote sports in some way.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Arun, to bring that to the fore. In fact, we've discussed this in the previous sessions as well, that the political will and the government support does play a important role when it comes to these little things, and it does help a lot. So I think thank you everybody, and I particularly to Julia and Ashley. I think you've still not had your breakfast. We had you really early in the morning from France, so so you can go and enjoy your breakfast now. And big thank you to all our panelists here. This was really a very, very interesting, this was really a very interesting discussion. And yes, I would once again request Arup and Mr. Gautam, both of you, please do visit the stalls, give us your feedback by 5 p.m. if you can, because we would like to announce the winners in the valedictory ceremony. We are tentatively planning it around 6 p.m. maybe 6:15, 20 or something. So if by 5:30 p.m. you can share the score sheets with us, we can, and we'll of course request all of you to be a part of the valedictory ceremony. It's a very informal thing. We are not doing any, just announcing the winners and thanking everyone. So it'll be nice if you can be a part of it. I'll share the links with you on your mobile phones.
Thank you. Thank you
So
so
much.
much. Wonderful to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank
Wonderful, and thank you, Ashley, for making this session so interesting and engaging. He's been unwell, and I was really worried that that he won't be able to do this session. And but I think he somehow managed. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Ashley
No,
and
no,
Julian
thank
can have what we call lunch and brunch now.
Try to find
you
some
all.
dosa. Not sure I will find some dosa here, but I will try.
Great, great. Nice
Thank you.
meeting you, Aritra, and
Same, Rajiv.
Arup,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Likewise.
Yeah,
Likewise.
Gautam.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
bye-bye.
all.
you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.